This is Hindol Sengupta, and this, of course, is Global Order. I am joined once again today by Major General A.K. Bardalai, who has an extensive experience, of course, not only in the Indian Army, in his career in the Indian Army, nearly 4 decades of it, but of course, also with the United Nations peacekeeping force. I invited General Bardalai to have this conversation with me because he has one particular interest, and that is in Bhutan. He's been extensively part of efforts to help Bhutan sort out, in a sense, its border issues. And he's been a student of this issue for a long, long time. Of course, India has deep concerns about Chinese negotiations with Bhutan to settle China's Bhutan border with Bhutan, or rather Bhutan's border with China. And all of this, of course, comes together in the scholarship of General Bardalai. General Bardalai, thanks very much for joining me to talk about the India-China-Bhutan conundrum.
Thank you so much, Hindol, for calling me again.
I want to begin by asking you, India has great concerns about what we think of as Chinese designs on Bhutan and Bhutanese territory, and negotiations happening between Bhutan and China to, in a sense, settle that border. Many would believe to China's advantage and to India's disadvantage. Take us through what's really happening and what do you think about this?
To begin with, I just want to make one clarification. Being a military man, I was not involved in border negotiation. This was between the government to government, the Ministry of External Affairs and government of Bhutan. But since I was posted in Bhutan, I was the commandant of the military training team. So I was aware of what was happening. So what happened is that because of my stay there, and when I could engage and interact with various people, I could have a ringside view of what was exactly happening. So yes, what you said is that, you look at the geography first, that Bhutan is a small country, about 350 by 150 kilometer, and is crammed between two big Asian powers, China to the north and India to its south. And it shares a boundary with India about 605 kilometers and with China about 470 kilometers. And out of that, there's a disputed area of the boundary, around 764 square kilometer disputed area between China and Bhutan. And within the disputed area, generally, two areas are more important. One is that right up in the north, the central sector, that is actually glaciated. There's about more than 469 kilometers. And one is towards southwest. That is, you would have heard the name of Chumbi Valley, the narrow strip which comes down south. And this is around southeast of around the south of the Chumbi Valley. There's about 269 kilometers. Now, this area is more important when you compare both north and southwest area. Southwest area is very important to both China and India because of it is a strategic location, that area, because the tri-junction of Bhutan, India, and China also somewhere nearby that place. So, you see, India's relationship with Bhutan has been really good at the very beginning. And after India became independent, I think relationship only grew. But obviously, China did not like this. It started getting worried. And it was a strategic space for India inside Bhutan. And China doesn't even have an embassy there. So China has been trying for so many years to dislodge India from his, I think, the strategic partnership with Bhutan. That is, I would say that the strategic space or the what it enjoyed inside Bhutan using various means. One is that China wanted to actually protect its southwestern border, that is towards Chumbi Valley side. I'll come to it later. Second, so they can do it by demarcating the boundary. Second, China always wanted to establish diplomatic relationship with Bhutan and establish an embassy. And also, China wants to increase its bilateral trade with Bhutan. And side by side, what China wanted to do it is that gradually and slowly started encroaching inside the disputed areas. So this is how, this is the position has been. But the boundary talk has been going around for between China and Bhutan. I told you the reason why China wanted to solve the boundary. China wanted to demarcate the boundary. And since about 1984, and about 25 rounds of talks have taken place. And both the side made claim lines and counter claim lines. But in all the claim lines of China, there was one place was always common, the famous Doklam Plateau. That is what had happened, the Doklam standoff in 2017. Now, why it is so important to you, I would like to clarify, is that Chumbi Valley is a kind of Achilles heel to China, because narrowest point is about 20 kilometers. And China always worried that any kind of, combined military movement from India and Bhutan from the either side can cut off Chumbi Valley. Whether one has got military capability or not is a different matter, or Bhutan has got. So best for China is to two things. One is that increase the size of the Chumbi Valley. It will give it more space for maneuver. Increase its size means both east and west and towards the south. And also that demarcate the boundary, internationally recognized boundary, that is the kind of international boundary. So obviously, any movement inside the Chumbi Valley, any increase in the size of the Chumbi Valley, it becomes a threat to India, because the space between the southern tip of Chumbi Valley and our India's Siliguri corridor, it reduces. Now, this threat was there earlier also. You'll be surprised that much before Sikkim became part of India, this threat was recognized or identified by a then political commissioner in Sikkim, I think Harishwar Dayal. And he suggested that it is a threat to India. Therefore, India must go and occupy it militarily. Of course, it did not happen. And this has been quoted by famous Tibetologist, a French Tibetologist, Claude RP. So China's aim has been very clear since then. Now, what had happened that China has been always blaming India that, whenever they want to reach kind of agreement in solving the boundary dispute, the India has been the stumbling block. Of course, since Bhutan is very closer to India, and Bhutan would have consulted India before agreeing to something in regard to demarcating the boundary. So that is the position as far as, Bhutan and what Bhutan thinks about it, and what the way China looks at the boundary positions. So 25 rounds of boundary talks have taken place. Nothing much has happened, except that I think last year Bhutanese Prime Minister made a statement. I think Bhutan and China is very close to sign an agreement that is to permanently demarcating the boundary.
Let me ask you a blunt question, especially in light of Doklam, General Bardalai. Do you believe that any such closure between Bhutan and China on the boundary question is likely to happen soon? And if that happens, what are the chances that what will be concluded, the agreement would be concluded would be to India's disadvantage?
You see, like I said that China wanted two things basically. They wanted to negotiate or they demarcate the boundary in the south, and Doklam must be part of that. The reasons I have cited that. They wanted to shift the tri-junction from Batangla to Gemochin. So this was, if you look at the map, it will be very clear to you. That second point was completely not negotiable. That is one. Third is that militarily, Bhutan cannot be expected to stand up against China. Now, to my mind, so far, if the boundary negotiations have taken place or discussions have taken place, Bhutan has held a position considering or factoring in India's security need. That is one. But what had happened that China possibly felt, I said that China started encroaching inside. So like I mentioned that Chumbi Valley wanted to increase the site, both east, west and south. As far as east-west is concerned, the eastern arm of Chumbi Valley, as you look at Chumbi Valley from the south, to right side, they have already encroached some areas. Side by side, China, what it has done, that they have offered some areas in the northern area, which they are claiming that we are ready to give up our claim in the northern area in exchange of the Doklam Plateau. But nothing much is moved. So what had happened when Doklam standoff had taken place? You see, before that it is on the writing on the wall that at some stage that Bhutan will end up establishing diplomatic relationship with China. You cannot stop it because Bhutan is a democratic country. In a democracy, what happened? Voice of the citizen populations grow stronger and stronger. Today, the Bhutan kings have got a lot of say. But the new generation of the population of Bhutan, maybe 10 years, 5 years hence, you do not know what they want. They may not be emotionally attached to how Bhutan has reached this stage. That is one point. But therefore, the point was there. My personal understanding also, this was, I think, the best recommendation that since a demarcation of boundaries is inevitable, might as well demarcate it as soon as possible without compromising our security. That is one. There's always fact. Now that closer the China comes towards India, the Doklam Plateau, the boundary, the threat will increase relatively, I would say. But how big is the threat? That is a different issue. But ultimately, threat is there, threat will increase. But obviously, like for instance, the threat was there in 1948. It is still there, but time has changed. We are not, India is not what it was in 48. India is not at what it was in 65 or 62 and 67. We are in and China knows about it. And that is the reason China always wanted to solve the boundary after negotiating in Bhutan. Now, Doklam, what had happened when Doklam standoff took place, it was expected because before the physically moving inside Bhutan, Chinese patrol, PLA patrol, is to regularly visit Doklam area and go back. But India never went inside. But India never thought that one day they will come in with the big, huge construction equipment. The day they came in, India intervened. This was called standoff. And this was told to public that they have disengaged. Yes, disengaged rightly, maybe disengaged by 1 meter, 10 meters, by 15 meters, but not by the completely withdrawn. And thereafter, what had happened? Indian soldiers came back and PLA troops stayed back there. You only have to look at the Google map, which is available, in public domain. Absolutely clear. The present infrastructure in the Doklam Plateau can easily house, I would about 5 to 6,000 PLA soldiers. Of course, I mean, one cannot see the soldier moving around, but it's understandable that they have got infrastructures. They will not leave it like that. So Chinese PLA soldiers are already there at Doklam Plateau now. They are not going to give up. They're not going to go back. So point is what? If you now you have India has the option to solve demarc, or Bhutan has the option to demarcate the boundary in the current position what they are. Or if you do not do that, PLA can move further south, and more it moves further south, threat, the relative threat as we perceive will increase.
Talk to us a little bit about, there is some feeling in certain quarters that Bhutan, which was always considered very close to India, is slowly, in a sense, moving or leaning towards China. How much of a truth do you think is there in this story? Is it true that Bhutan and Bhutan's administration is increasingly beginning to or proceeding towards leaning towards China?
I will not say they're leaning towards China. I think it is very, whatever the shift is taking place in their thinking, it is quite pragmatic. First, I said that it is very difficult for the Bhutan to delicately balance its position between two countries without offending anyone. So how do they do that? So many wars have taken place, India and China, but Bhutan's relation has been quite good with both the sides. Now, what happened? If Chinese move in militarily, what does Bhutan do? Is Bhutan military or Royal Bhutan Army is capable of standing up to PLA? Their strength is about 10,000 soldiers. Out of that, 1,000 is about Royal Bhutanese Guard. That is one part, military part. They do not have that military capability. Second, the kingdom, royal, the kings and all, they are very much interested to remain more aligned with India because it helps them. They naturally gravitates toward India because India is not imperialist country. That is one. They have, and what happened? Because India will not interfere, or India also not going to corrupt the Bhutanese people with money like Chinese can do that. So power and influence of the royalty kings will remain inside the Bhutan. This is very important for them to that remain influential. So what happened? Two factors now in Bhutan, three factors. Population loved the king. They look at him like God. And the king has got 100% support of the Royal Bhutan Army. And the Bhutanese people are deeply religious, and king have got complete support from the Buddhism, the religious side. They call it Je Khenpo. Now, Bhutan is a democratic country. Gone are the days during the present, not even present king, fourth or third king and all, when they were young students. Those days, they had to walk from Thimphu right up to Hasimara. All those influential people possibly could have used a tractor. Walking for so many kilometers, they'll come up to Hasimara, influential. They maybe take lift in a normal tea garden, trolleys. Then they will go to first time, they will see the lights, railway stations. They will study in good school in Darjeeling. And I would say that kind of, mostly in Darjeeling kind of thing, or the Kalimpong. But today's generation is not like that. They're luckier. They have not seen these difficult days. Today, they don't have to walk down. They pick up the flight. They get scholarship. They don't even land in India to study. They go far away. They study in USA, study in Australia, and name a place far away from India. So what do you expect of these present generations? And they may feel that is what is wrong with establishing diplomatic relationship with China. Because China is giving us only more money. They're giving us more money, and it will help economic development of the country. And in democratic setup, the prime minister has to come back. He wants to come back to power, elected man. To come back to power, he wants population mandate. And what does he show to the population? He should be able to give something. If he gets more something for somewhere. So I would not say he's leaning toward the China is the wrong thing. Being very practical, that is one. Second part is that you just have no option. So they have reached this thing, Doklam, and a northern side, what they have done, if you want to know, I can tell you about the northern side.
Yes, please tell us about the northern side.
Okay. I was telling you about, in northern side, I said it was a glaciated area. They offered, their offer was that, look, we are going to give up our claim in a northern glaciated area, provided you agree to settle the boundary inclusive in a Doklam area. You know, there are too many lines. I will go into so many details. But nobody took it seriously. Even when I was there, I was not directly involved in it. I also did not take it seriously because northern area is a glaciated region. So what China did was, they made it a very, very non-significant piece of island. They have to cross passes. They made it very significant and strategically important. What they did was, they added the spiritual content to the piece of ground. Immediately when you come to the Bhutan side, after crossing the glaciated area, there is one area known as Beul region. Beul is known as hidden valleys. You know, there's some number of villages, cluster of villages, supposed to have remained hidden. And according to Guru Padma Sambhava, also known as Rinpoche, he is also the second Buddha, revered as in one. He says he is supposed to have, said that these villages are hidden, or he concealed the villages, and only people with very high spiritual power can, I think, unearth the villages, bring out the villages from where it is hidden, uncover the villages. And when the world comes to an end, Bhutanese people are supposed to take shelter there. That was the significance of that area. So it is emotionally and spiritually very important to Bhutanese people. Second point, not very far away from the Beul area, slightly east of that, the father of the first king of Bhutan was born. Like I said, that to Bhutanese people, king is something like God. Now, that is moment they realized that China have started claiming this area and started constructing villages. Can you imagine? At least 3 clusters, and they have started constructing villages. Very high official, China's political party had come and visited. They have their party offices. They have got military and police outposts. They have got administrative office. They have also that satellite receiving station. Very interesting. And they're not going to give up. So they're not going to give up in the Beul region. And what they can do, not very far away from the east-west lateral, maybe by Chinese standard, they will take about maybe maximum 2 weeks. When they come there, it will be very easy to cut Bhutan into 2 parts. And if they cut Bhutan into 2 parts from east to west, there's a place known as Bomthang that is known for, famous for religion in Bhutan and culture. East of Bhutan, surprisingly, that side, Arunachal Pradesh. Now, between Bomthang and Arunachal Pradesh, slightly towards the north, or west of Arunachal, there is known as Sakteng National Life Sanctuary. The Chinese had never claimed it this earlier, but suddenly about 2014 or so, they have claimed it. Now, they have claimed that area. They're sitting in northern area, Beul area. They're sitting in a Doklam area. They have already enlarged the size of the Chumbi Valley, and they have constructed villages. You would have heard the news at the southeast of Doklam area, 2 villages, Pagda villages come up. Now they are sitting pretty in those villages. This is in a chess game checkmate. So what do you do about it? So now, then what next step can be that I must come to that Doklam area. While they're sitting in a Doklam area, they're in a bowl. The PLA soldiers were sitting in Doklam area. They're vulnerable to the dominating heights which are occupied or held by the Indian Army. So how do they mitigate the threat? They have two options. One, in and around, they demarcate the boundary, internationally recognized boundary, so that they will get diplomatic assurance that no invasion will take place, or they go and occupy higher heights, which will be in turn the offset the threat which they were facing militarily from the Indian Army. So, or demarcate the boundary. Now, I think time has come that what has happened, I always say that, we in our human body has got a lot of pressure points. We have headache. Some of the pressure points, if you can identify, headaches go away. But some of the pressure points, experts, they can completely immobilize a human being. So China has come to that pressure point. They're given a checkmate. Look, either demarcate the boundary, find a solution. They have not said that they will come, but it's a very logical military conclusion, because to mitigate the threat in Doklam, they will come further south, occupy the higher ridges, and which will overlook the Siliguri corridor, the threat. That is a different thing. I can tell you that how big is the threat. People have, I think, people have made a huge hue and cry of the threat. It is not as much as made out to be for different reasons.
Why do you say that?
You see, like I said earlier, that it
Let
is
me
not
just add a
90.
question there. Why do you say it's not such a big threat, considering many people believe that, a direct attack on the chicken's neck, so to speak, the Siliguri corridor, would essentially, bifurcate India from the Indian Northeast?
Okay, 1948 threat was felt. 1948, when Harisha Dayal made a statement, he made two things. He actually told Chinese that there is a threat from Indian Army, even if the Chinese did not think. And he also told Indians there's a threat from China. That is one. Now, point is that situation has changed from 1968, 62, 67, 71. Now we are in 2024. Now, Chinese also and PLA also knows Indian Army and Indian armed forces in a very strong dominating positions, that it is not a piece of cake for them. That is one part. That threat is physical threat is gone. But threat is there very much, but adequate mitigating measures have been instituted. The threat cannot manifest. Second, if PLA soldiers come to the dominating heights, people say, why would they come? Two things, questions. One, they look at the Siliguri corridor to threaten Siliguri corridor, or, like I said, they want to actually mitigate the threat to the Doklam Plateau. That is very much sure. But as far as manifesting a new threat to Siliguri corridor, today's age, firstly, militarily, they cannot simply roll down. They can, yes, overlook. They can have maybe collect intelligence. But today, do you need to physically occupy a place to collect intelligence? Look at what is happening in Ukraine war, drone warfare, satellite imagery. You know everything exactly what is happening. You don't have to come there. And people can look deep into a territory without going and physically occupy. And nobody wants a war. So my point is that if you analyze this, it is not that if you do not want, point is that I always believe that if you feel that solving a boundary problem help in solving a bilateral relationship, I think we must solve the boundary problem. That is one, provided it is not done from a weaker position. That is one. I always say, if India has to solve the boundary problem in India, wherever it is, it should not be from a weaker position, from a stronger position.
I have one
Second,
last. Sorry, please go on.
no. Second, I want to.
Yeah, please.
Second is that, but if you feel that by not solving the boundary problem, it will make you weaker, then you must solve the problem post haste. That is where we have landed up. India has landed up because of not solving the boundary dispute between Bhutan and China.
My last question, General Bardalai, you've given a very astute and a very detailed explanation of the situation between Bhutan, China, and India. Now, you're in your explanation, you've mentioned multiple times, how Bhutan sees the situation, what India understands, and you've also mentioned that the question of Bhutan leaning towards China is not perhaps not very accurate. Bhutan really just wants to solve its own problems, and Bhutan gets a lot of benefits from India. So this leaning sort of assumption is perhaps not correct. Talk to us from the Chinese point of view. When the China sees all of this, right? What is the Chinese response? What do they want? And how are they responding to this very intricate situation?
China has been continuously trying. They have offered more money to Bhutan. Bhutan has not accepted anything. Bilateral trade, they have gone to the extent of saying increase the bilateral trade at a lower district level also. China wants to establish diplomatic relationship. In fact, to my surprise, when the current king was during the wedding ceremony of the current king, the Chinese ambassador was present. But in the sense, I think who invited, maybe the government had invited him. Democratic government invited him. So China has got a clear cut. China want to dislodge India from his strategic position, as simple. And they are using military and strategic methods to achieve that. They will not stop until they demarcate the boundary. That's the first priority. Demarcate the boundary with Bhutan, and they are not going to give up that area. And third is, of course, diplomatic relationship. And once diplomatic relationship begins, what happened? I think it can go to any level. Bilateral trades will increase, and they will flood the country with a lot of money and Chinese goods, as is a lot of Chinese tourists visit Bhutan. They will do it. And you can understand what can happen. You look at our neighborhood, what has happened. And I would say that I will add one more line.
So let me ask you, General Bardalai, essentially you're saying if this kind of diplomatic ties increase between Bhutan and China, essentially India loses out. China will flood the country with Chinese goods. There are already lots of Chinese tourists coming to Bhutan. Essentially, the paradigm will shift, right?
Paradigm will shift, but do you have any option? So you be slightly more intelligent is something like that. Oh, I'll give you a very life example. A son, when he grows up, after he becomes an adult, maybe 21, 22, settle himself independent, he always wants to become independent. If the father understands that, he will let him go as a friend. If he doesn't allow him to go, one day he may say, look, you allow me to go, otherwise go on my own way. Today, what has happened? Look at our neighborhood, Hindol. You see, we are so far the closest relatively with Bhutan. Look at Nepal. It is a Hindu kingdom. It has gone. Look at Bangladesh. Bangladesh today has become a country. Credit goes to India 1971. But logically, we should presume that what we have done, India has done, they should be grateful to India that why they have a country, they should be actually emotionally and spiritually forget everything. Always they said show the loyalty or respect, whatever it is. But it's not happening. Whose fault is it? Because I think as India, I am not a politician or diplomat. I am using my own mind to state this. I think we behave like big brothers. Nobody wants to be treated as a small brother. We are something like that. We are not very proud of flaunting our wealth and power. It is something like that. India is a pathological for India always tell others that, look, I have done this thing too. India is something like that. I'm sorry to say this. If you give a crutch to a lame man, we'll write it down donated by India. Until we change this mindset. Second thing, who needs more? Do you need Bhutan more or Bhutan needs India more? I think we are losing out.
Yeah. Ominous words, General Bardalai. Thank you very much. Astute observations, astute warning about the real situation on the ground, a long-term observer of Bhutan and, of course, the Bhutan-India-China conundrum. Major General Bardalai, thanks very much for talking to me and explaining this. Thank you.
Thank you so much.